I grew up on the edge of town, where the mountains pressed close and the roads narrowed until they felt more like trails. My parents always warned me about the hollow beyond the last bend, the one where the trees grew so tightly together that sunlight barely touched the ground. "Don't go there after dark," they'd say, their voices low and serious, the kind of warning that made a child's imagination run wild. But I was stubborn and curious, the kind of kid who needed to see what everyone else feared. One evening, when the sky had turned a bruised purple behind the peaks, I decided to go. The road to the hollow was narrower than I remembered, flanked by gnarled oaks that scratched at the fading light like brittle fingers reaching for the clouds. Every step I took seemed to swallow the sound of my own movements, the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes echoing too sharply in the heavy, unnatural quiet. No crickets, no wind stirring the leaves, not even a bird calling. Just a stillness so complete it felt alive. I remember the first house clearly. It rose from the mist like a forgotten memory. Windows dark and uninviting, doors slightly ajar. The porch sagged, but everything else looked untouched, like someone had just stepped away for a moment. Plates sat on the table inside, shoes lined up neatly by the hearth, a small wooden toy abandoned on the grass outside. I called out, my voice trembling, and heard only the echo of my own words bouncing back. My heart picked up its pace, each beat louder than the last, and I moved closer, compelled by a mix of dread and fascination. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the yard as night fell, moving in ways that defied the wind. I could have sworn I saw figures, pale and still, staring at me from the upstairs windows, but when I approached, the houses were empty. My stomach twisted. I tried to leave, retracing my steps, but the path I had followed no longer existed. The forest had closed in, dark and unwelcoming, each tree a silent sentinel. Panic clawed at me as I pushed forward blindly, branches tearing at my clothes, the scent of damp earth filling my nose, until I stumbled onto the main road, heart hammering like a drum. The hollow was silent again, ordinary, as if it had never existed. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day, I returned with a couple of friends, hoping to prove I wasn't losing my mind. We walked every inch of the hollow, searched every dip and rise, but there was nothing. No houses, no porch, no toy in the grass, only dense forest stretching endlessly. I remember standing there, the sunlight making the shadows seem shorter, and feeling the chill run down my spine. Something had been there the night before. I knew it. Something that wasn't supposed to be touched or seen by us. Even now, years later, I pass that ridge and feel a tightening in my chest, a flicker in my peripheral vision that makes me glance up the mountainside. Sometimes, when the wind is right and the forest is too quiet, I swear I hear the faint echo of doors creaking, the whisper of plates being set, the soft padding of small feet across a yard that doesn't exist anymore. That hollow didn't just vanish. It watches, waits, and remembers. The night I first saw it, I had gone expecting maybe an old cabin, some relic of forgotten families. What I found instead was a place frozen in time, suspended between memory and reality, where the ordinary rules of the world seemed to bend. I remember my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob of the first house, half expecting someone to step out, to call me an intruder. But there was nothing. Just that silence pressing against my ears, filling every corner of my mind. I thought I saw movement upstairs, a shadow that shifted in rhythm with the fading light. I froze, convinced I'd imagined it, and yet when I took another step, the shape didn't vanish. It recoiled only slightly, like it was watching me cautiously. My instincts screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't obey at first. There's a strange kind of paralysis when your brain senses danger that's impossible to explain. Eventually, the panic overcame me. I turned back the way I thought I came, but the path had been erased, swallowed by undergrowth and gnarled roots that weren't there before. Each step felt like sinking into quicksand, the shadows around me deepening into forms that seemed to press closer with every heartbeat. I ran then, branches whipping my face and hands, tripping over hidden roots, the sound of my own ragged breathing deafening in the quiet. When I finally burst out onto the main road, gasping and bruised, it was as if the hollow had never been there. The forest around it looked normal, serene even, birds chirping lazily in the morning light, the world carrying on as though nothing had changed. I returned again later with adults, hoping for answers, hoping for some explanation that would make sense of the terror I'd felt. We combed the area, shining flashlights into the hollows and hollers, calling names, listening for any sign of life. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of habitation, not even the faintest trace that a village had ever existed there. And yet, I knew what I'd seen. The hollow existed, if only for a few hours, a ghostly reflection of lives abruptly paused, memories trapped in a place unreachable by normal means. I've told people about it over the years, but they always look at me like I'm crazy. I can't blame them, I would have thought the same. But I remember the smell of the wooden floors, the way the toy felt cold and smooth under my fingers, the way the wind seemed to carry voices that weren't there. It wasn't a dream. Not really. Even now, I feel it when I'm near the ridge. A tightening, a whisper of movement at the edge of my vision. Sometimes I stop and stare into the tree line, half expecting to see that first house appear, lights flickering, the door slightly ajar, inviting me back. But nothing ever comes. And yet I know the hollow waits. It's patient. It remembers. And I know that one night, if I'm careless, it might just open its doors to me again, letting me see what the rest of the world will never believe. The thought keeps me awake sometimes, that somewhere just beyond the familiar trees, a place exists that shouldn't, and that in its silence, it carries the weight of everything that vanished without a trace. I was 16 when I first stayed with my relatives in Hollow Creek, a place that felt frozen in time, wedged between the ridges like a secret no one outside the county ever spoke of. The first few nights were quiet, almost comforting, the creak of old floorboards and the babble of the creek outside forming a kind of lullaby. But then it began, the faintest sound at first, voices carried on the wind, barely more than a whisper. I told myself it was the creek, the way water moves over stones, sometimes making patterns that sound like murmurs. I even laughed at my own imagination. But by the third night, I could no longer ignore it. The whispers grew more insistent, curling around the corners of my mind, too deliberate to be mistaken for wind. It was as though someone or something was speaking just beyond the tree line, reciting names, murmuring warnings I could almost but not quite understand. At first, the house itself seemed to breathe with these sounds. Doors would creak open slowly, though no one else was awake. Footsteps echoed through hallways I knew were empty. I would wake, convinced someone had moved in my room, only to find the air still and the floorboards bare. My cousins laughed at me when I mentioned it, calling it Hollow Creek charm or old wood settling. But I knew better. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern that made no sense yet demanded attention. One night, drawn by the rising intensity of the whispers, I followed them outside. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the woods along the creek seemed darker than the night itself. The voices led me down the familiar road toward the edge of town, to the old church nobody went near anymore. Its roof sagged like it had been weighed down by the years, windows shattered, doors swollen with rot. I stepped inside, my boots crunching against broken pews and shards of glass, and felt the weight of something unspoken pressing in from all sides. The whispers grew louder here, circling me in the shadows, no longer distant, no longer mere wind. Names were scrawled across the wooden floorboards, deep scratches into the old wood. None of them were familiar, yet they carried urgency, as if begging to be read, remembered, or maybe forgotten. I felt my heartbeat hammering against my ribs, each pulse echoing in time with the soft creaks and shifting shadows. I wanted to leave, to retreat back into the comforting darkness of the woods, but something held me there, a combination of fear and fascination that made my legs stiff. When I finally bolted, breaking free from the invisible pressure, the world outside seemed wrong. The street that had led to the church looked different, as though it had been erased overnight. Houses that I knew were there, across from the church, had vanished. Not burned down or overgrown, simply gone, leaving empty, uneven patches of dirt and grass. I stumbled back, disoriented, panic rising with each step. By the time I returned to the house, my breathing ragged, my hands trembling, I could barely speak. I tried to tell my relatives, but they brushed it off, half smiling, half concerned. "Some places don't like to be remembered," one of the older men said quietly, as if it were a lesson I was meant to learn and then forget. Sleep was impossible that night. Every shadow in the room seemed to shift, every rustle of leaves outside sounded like murmured names, the cadence of voices I couldn't fully comprehend. Over the next few days, I wandered Hollow Creek during daylight, searching for the vanished row of houses, but the town looked normal again, as if nothing had ever been missing. Yet I knew it had been there. I remembered the splintered wood, the names etched into the church floor, the way the voices had pressed against my mind so insistently I could hardly breathe. I tried to explain it to friends, but they either laughed or shook their heads, unable, or unwilling, to imagine a world where a whole row of houses could simply vanish, leaving only a memory behind. I never went back to the church after that night, but the experience never truly left me. On nights when the wind is right, I swear I hear faint murmurs calling my name, carried along the creek that winds through the hills. Sometimes, walking past Hollow Creek, I pause at the edge of the woods, straining to hear the voices. I've caught glimpses of movement among the trees, shadows too deliberate to be animals, fleeting shapes that vanish if I blink. I've asked local elders about it, but they offer only knowing glances and quiet warnings. Some places, they say, keep their secrets, and Hollow Creek is one of those places. The memories of that night linger in my mind, thick and heavy like the humid Appalachian air in summer. The fear isn't just in the whispers themselves, but in the silence that follows, in the certainty that the world is larger, stranger, and more unknowable than we allow ourselves to believe. I remember standing in that church, hearing the names, feeling the weight of something ancient pressing in, and knowing that I was not supposed to understand it. And yet, I cannot shake the memory, cannot forget the way the shadows moved, the way the air seemed alive, listening, waiting. Hollow Creek didn't just exist for me that night. It marked me, and even now, I cannot walk past it without feeling the tug of those voices, reminding me that some things are best left alone, even if they never truly disappear. Even years later, the sensation follows me. A rustle in the leaves, a creak in an old floorboard, a name whispered on the wind. I can feel Hollow Creek reaching out, reminding me that it remembers, that it waits. And I know that the memory of that place, as terrifying and incomprehensible as it was, will never fully release me. There's a lingering sorrow in knowing that something once present can vanish entirely, yet leave behind the impression of its existence, a hollow ache where certainty once was. I don't know if anyone else will ever experience what I did, and perhaps that is the point. Hollow Creek exists on the edge of memory, a place that can vanish, reappear, and haunt the living with the faintest echo of its presence, forever questioning what is real and what is imagined. I remember the dare like it was yesterday, though the memory has a way of twisting, the edges smudged like smoke in the twilight. My cousin had that look in his eye, the one that tells you mischief and danger are about to collide, and he dared me to cross the fields beyond our village. I had always known those fields to be ordinary, rolling stretches of grass that gave way to the forest, dotted here and there with barns long abandoned, their boards rotting and roofs caved in. But that evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills, the fog rolled in thick and low, curling around the bases of the barns like something alive, like it was hiding. There was a hush that settled over the world, heavier than the usual quiet of approaching night. Every step I took seemed to echo unnaturally, and the familiar scent of earth was tinged with something acrid, like smoldering wood, though there was no fire in sight. As I moved deeper into the field, the smoke began. At first, it was just a wisp, curling into the air lazily, but soon it thickened, rising in irregular plumes that followed my every step, snaking along the ground and drifting like tendrils of fog with intent. I called out to my cousin, but the only response was the whispering. Names, voices, urgent, pleading, like echoes of people long gone. I didn't recognize a single one, yet the sound carried weight, a desperation that seemed to press against my chest. My pulse quickened. I wanted to run, but some part of me, curiosity or foolish bravery, kept me moving forward. And then I saw it, a village, or at least the skeleton of one. The houses were half collapsed, roofs fallen in, walls warped and splintered, yet somehow arranged as though someone had lived there yesterday. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of decay, dust and damp wood, pressing against my lungs as I took cautious steps along the broken paths. Shadows moved just beyond my vision, subtle at first, but insistent, like the field itself was alive. My heart thumped in my ears, and I could feel the smoke curling closer, brushing against my skin, almost tactile, almost aware. Then I saw them. Figures crouched near the ruins, hunched, motionless. At first, I thought they were mannequins or some trick of the fog, but as I blinked and the smoke shifted, I realized they were human, or at least once had been. Their eyes were hollow, unblinking, staring into the void, yet somehow aware of me. They didn't move, didn't speak, and yet the weight of their gaze pressed in like a physical thing. Panic rose in my chest. I turned to run, but the field stretched endlessly, unfamiliar terrain twisting beneath my feet, rows of barns and fences warping in ways they never had before. Each step was a struggle, the fog thickening, the whispers growing louder, circling me, calling names I didn't know, filling my head with urgent pleas I couldn't respond to. I ran blindly, crashing through brush and tripping over roots, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. Every so often, I glanced back, desperate for something familiar to guide me, but the skeletal village seemed to shift with each step, buildings appearing and vanishing, shadows crawling along the edges of vision. I wanted to scream, but the sound felt trapped in my throat, swallowed by the oppressive air. Finally, after what felt like hours but could have been minutes, the fog thinned, the shapes dissolved, and I stumbled onto the main road, my body shaking, lungs burning. The world had righted itself. The fields looked ordinary again, empty, silent, the air clear and cold in a way that made me shiver. When I finally returned home, I looked back toward the fields, half expecting the smoke to rise again, half expecting the village to reappear. But nothing moved. The fog had lifted, the barns looked abandoned as they always had, the earth still and ordinary. And yet I knew something had changed, something irretrievable. The memory of that village, of the figures with hollow eyes and the smoke that followed me, remained etched into my mind like a brand. I couldn't shake it, and even now, years later, when the fog rolls in thick over the hills, I feel the pull of that place, the whisper of names I cannot answer, calling from the fields beyond the village that should not exist. The strange thing is, no one in the village would believe me. To tell the elders would be foolish. They know the old places, the fields beyond the barns, and they never speak of them after sunset. It's as if the land itself holds its secrets close, revealing only glimpses to those who are foolish enough, or curious enough, to seek them out. And maybe that's what the smoke was, a warning, a lure, a remnant of something that once lived there and refuses to be forgotten. I never went back after that night, but the memory lingers, persistent, intrusive. I can feel it when the fog rolls in, see shadows at the edges of my vision, hear the faintest rustle in empty fields. And I know, deep down, that the village was never meant to be found by someone like me, yet it found me, marked me with its presence, and left me with a hollow ache, a whispering reminder that some places are not ours to understand. The fear is quiet but unrelenting, a weight that sits in the chest, a reminder that the world is larger and stranger than it seems, and some corners of it will remain forever unclaimed, their secrets curling in smoke just beyond the reach of light. I'd been hiking Pine Ridge for years, drawn to its solitude and the way the trails wound through the mountains like veins of quiet. There was a peace in those ridges, a rhythm to the rustling leaves, the distant hum of creeks, the smell of damp earth that always followed rain. But one evening everything changed. I was ascending the trail just as the sun was sinking behind the western peaks, the last golden rays scattering through the trees, when it vanished abruptly, replaced by a gray, oppressive gloom that seemed to swallow the world whole. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the path, the familiar ridge taking on a strange, distorted edge. I stopped for a moment, heart thumping in that subtle way that warns you something is off, but I told myself it was just late autumn, just the fading light playing tricks. Then I saw it, a faint glow ahead, small, flickering but unmistakable. At first, I thought it must be another hiker, someone with a lantern or headlamp, moving along the trail. I called out, my voice cracking in the thickening air, but there was no answer. The glow pulsed faintly, and instinct drove me toward it, curiosity overriding the unease curling in my stomach. As I drew closer, the light revealed itself to be coming from a cluster of houses tucked into a small valley. Buildings I had never noticed before despite hiking this ridge countless times. Smoke rose from crooked chimneys, curling into the cold air, and windows glimmered as if warm fires were burning inside. For a moment, it felt normal, almost comforting, but that feeling was fragile, shattering the second I stepped into the valley's shadow. I called out again, tentative this time, and the lights died instantly. The smoke vanished. The warm, lived-in glow I had imagined disappeared, leaving only empty silhouettes of buildings and a cold wind that seemed to push through my very bones. My stomach twisted as the realization hit me. The houses were gone. Not burned down or abandoned in a way I could understand. Simply gone, leaving behind patches of charred earth and the acrid scent of damp soil that clung to the forest floor. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. I stumbled forward, heart hammering, eyes straining to find some landmark, anything familiar, but the valley was empty, silent, and impossibly still. I ran, reckless and disoriented, through the undergrowth, branches whipping my face and hands, tripping over roots that seemed to reach for me. Every direction looked unfamiliar, though I knew the ridge like the back of my hand. When I finally burst onto the trailhead, gasping, soaked in sweat despite the cold, the world had righted itself. The trees, the path, the mountains, everything looked exactly as it always had. And yet, I knew what I had seen. Something had been there, and it had vanished before my eyes. The next day I tried to tell locals about it, about the cluster of houses, the smoke, the warmth, and then the sudden emptiness. They listened politely, nodding, and then shook their heads. "No villages ever been on that ridge," one elderly man said, voice low, almost reverent. "Never has, never will. Some things, some places, they only appear if you're meant to see them. Best not to linger on it." I wanted to argue, to insist I wasn't imagining it, but something in his tone froze me. There was an unspoken warning there, a caution I could not ignore. Even now, years later, I feel it in the dark hours. On certain nights, when the wind is just right and the clouds cover the moon, I catch the faintest glow from my bedroom window, a flicker so quick it could be a trick of the eye. But I know better. It's there, or it appears to be, and I remember the feel of the warmth I imagined, the smoke curling up into the cold night air, the impossibility of a small village rising from nothing and then vanishing before my gaze. I remember the chill that followed, how the air pressed in around me, carrying the scent of soil and wood and the intangible weight of something that shouldn't exist. That night on Pine Ridge changed me in ways I can't fully describe. It wasn't the fear of encountering another person or some creature. It was the profound impossibility of the place itself, the way it existed and disappeared without warning, without explanation. I've tried to rationalize it. Tricks of light, a reflection on the clouds, fatigue, imagination running wild. But no rational explanation captures the texture of that memory. The oppressive certainty that the houses were real, the smoke real, the warmth real, even if only for a moment. Sometimes, when I walk the familiar trails, I catch myself pausing at the edge of the valley where the glow appeared, half expecting to see it again. And sometimes I do, in the corner of my vision, a flicker that vanishes if I look directly, leaving only a hollow ache in its place. I've stopped hiking that ridge alone. I don't call anyone else to see it. Some things, I've learned, exist only for the one who glimpsed them first, and any attempt to share it diminishes the memory, weakens it, and perhaps angers whatever waits there in the unseen corners of the mountains. The memory of Pine Ridge isn't just a story I tell myself. It's a persistent sensation, a presence that creeps into my mind in quiet moments, reminding me that not everything is fixed, not everything is visible, and not everything is meant to be understood. That night, a place appeared where there should have been none, and vanished in an instant, leaving me to carry its memory alone. Even now, I know the ridge holds it still, tucked in the folds of earth and shadow, waiting for the next person to wander too close, to see what isn't meant to be seen, and to feel that impossible weight of something that can exist and disappear without leaving a trace.